powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast with Adam Kaplan and Geoff Mosher, who's in the house today. Taking a look at a bunch of different things. Of course, new coordinator still not hired on either side of the ball as we get ready, Geoff, for the Combine. And we thought maybe the Eagles might want to get their coordinator situation settled by the Combine, but that hasn't happened yet. Are you surprised that no decisions have been made there?
Mildly. I mean, if you would have told me like 2 weeks ago that they still wouldn't have it done, I might be a little bit surprised. But seeing how they cast a pretty wide net, and then we knew last week, we had reported on Inside the Birds that they were going to start doing their kind of second rounds of interviews. The first ones were done via virtually, and then there'll be a second round done with guys coming in to see the Eagles. Then that it might take a little bit. So going to the Combine without your defensive coordinator, quote unquote, in place, it's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, the Combine is mainly about the interviews. The workouts, whether or not the times and the measurements match what the scouts saw on tape. And if they do match, that's great. If they don't, then the scouts go back to the tape. And of course, the medical evaluations are huge. It might be number one for some teams. I tell you, that's the most important thing. So you're not getting like scheme done at the Combine. You're not like figuring out whether you're running a 3-4 over or a 4-3 under, or you're blitzing with your safety more. So it's really not vital that you've got a DC in place there. I mean, of course it helps to just have as many eyes as possible. But what I'm saying is it doesn't hold the Eagles back, right, going into this year coming up, that it's taking this while to get a defensive coordinator.
I would imagine right now, I mean, again, Glenn Schumann, he's out. A lot of these guys are getting jobs or out. Is Denard Wilson, in your mind, still the clear? I mean, I know Sean Desai is interviewing today. Is Denard Wilson still the clear favorite for you?
Oh, I wouldn't say clear favorite. We've only said that Denard Wilson is a guy that they really like. And then we've noted that Nick Sirianni, he said it himself, he's obsessed with developing his own coaches, and he's big on promoting his own coaches. But the problem that he faces, Denard Wilson, is that while he is an in-house guy and a veteran guy, I mean, there just happen to be guys with really good credentials out there as far as defensive coordinator. You saw Vance Joseph was one. He already got the DC job with the Broncos. Sean Desai obviously has been a defensive coordinator for the Bears and a successful one. And he was just with the Seahawks this past year. So he's facing kind of a pool out there of candidates who were impressive. So I'm not saying he's not getting the job. I'm just saying it doesn't surprise me that there are other guys out of the house that are being considered. But I don't think he can be. I don't think you would rule out Denard Wilson either.
And then on the offensive side of the ball, real quick, I mean, everybody just assumes it's going to be Brian Johnson. Are you surprised that hasn't been announced yet?
No, because the Eagles typically announce everything all at once, so it doesn't surprise me. I mean, you see, nobody has interviewed Brian Johnson for any offensive coordinator positions that were open previously, right? And that's because, as we said on the podcast, teams that were calling the Eagles to gauge whether or not they could put the slip in the interview, and were told, don't bother. So now here's an interesting thing. I did check. You and I talked about this last week. I double-checked it. I think you've even said it, and you're correct. The Eagles still have to have interviews with two minority candidates outside of the organization before they can name Brian Johnson offensive coordinator. And what I checked into is, what if you're promoting someone who is a minority or a woman? Do you still have to follow through that protocol? And you still do. That's what I was told. You still have to follow the two outside candidates protocol. So I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that when the Eagles are out in Indianapolis this week, they're probably going to do a couple of these interviews, intel-like interviews, but it's still going to be Brian Johnson at the end of the day.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Glenn Schumann, a lot of people are wondering, okay, was he a genuine interest guy? Well, he decided to go back to college, which, some people would say, man, you'd rather go back to Georgia as a co-coordinator rather than potentially be up for this job. So give us a little thought on that candidacy.
Yeah, well, what I was told was that, because there was some sort of either speculation or curiosity out there about why they were interviewing him that have anything to do with the fact that they've got Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean, and they need to get Jordan Davis in a better spot next year and coached up. And was this really for intel, or was this really because of their connection to the Georgia program now, or was the interest genuine? And what I was told was the interest was very genuine. It was real. He is a rising young guy. I mean, I say young guy, he's 32 years old. So he's going to probably get an NFL job someday if he wants it, assuming that he continues at Georgia to put out NFL-level talent and they continue to do well defensively, which, we'd have to presume they will. So that was a real interview that the Eagles had with him, and I was told they were impressed with him. They find him to be an impressive coach, and like I said, he's probably got a good future in either college football or in the NFL.
Geoff, I want to kind of – this is a little a lot of times you connect the dots, right? And everybody remembers John Gannon is now in Arizona, but we forget that Jim Schwartz got hired by Cleveland. Would any of the current Eagle defensive players, would it surprise you if Jim Schwartz, Gannon might go after a Bradbury or a Javon Hargrave, but do you think Schwartz may infiltrate a little bit here?
Well, and don't forget with the Cleveland Browns, Mike, that Catherine Rach is now their assistant general manager. So she's got a knowledge of this Eagles roster in and out, and she was here and watched, Marcus Epps and C.J. Edwards go from being undrafted rookies and, Marcus coming over from Minneapolis and getting their time. Now, she wasn't here this year where both of them really emerged as very good starters for the team, but I'm sure she's quite aware. And like you mentioned, Jim Schwartz has a connection, Jonathan Gannon, Shane Steichen. This is the beware of poachers offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles, because not only do you have to worry about the fact that these guys all had good years, so they're attractive to anybody in the league that might need a corner or might need a safety or might need a linebacker, but now you've got 4 or 5. I mean, you got Brandon Brown, the assistant GM of the Giants who came from the Eagles. You got Ian Cunningham, the assistant GM of the Bears who came from the Eagles. You got all sorts of coaches and former personnel people around the league who are very familiar. Oh, Andy Weidel in Pittsburgh, right? Mm-hmm. We know Pittsburgh needs offensive linemen. We know Isaac Samhall is a free agent. So you said it the best. You connect the dots, and you can see a lot of potential suitors that you know of just based on that team's familiarity with what the Eagles have.
I was thinking about that this morning. I said, people forget Jim Schwartz is now the defensive coordinator in Cleveland. There's some guys here that he coached, because I tweeted out the other day, hey, don't discount Gannon taking some of these guys. And, of course, everybody hates Gannon. Why would anybody want to play for him? Well, I don't know. I had my career best year if I'm Javon Hargrave. I had my best year ever playing for John Gannon. If I'm James Bradbury, I had my best year ever. If I'm T.J. Edwards or Kaiser White or Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, almost every guy in this defense had their best year of their careers playing in this defense. So Gannon is a high probability of stealing guys, I would imagine, and I would think Schwartz also looms.
Definitely. Now, then you start to look at the teams. All right, Arizona has good safeties. They got Budda Baker. They got another kid there that they really like. So it might not be safety, but certainly linebacker, T.J. Edwards, or even defensive line if he wants to bring in like a veteran, like whether it could be Fletcher Cox, who knows how much money the Cardinals will have to spend. But I totally agree that the familiarity that he has and then Shane Steichen has in particular, and you mentioned Jim Schwartz, I'd be shocked if one or two of the Eagles free agents don't wind up signing with teams that are coached by former Eagles coaches.
I agree on that one. Let me get your thoughts. I know you guys at Inside the Birds last year had a lot on Kelce. What is your initial thought on, do they have to convince him to return? Does he want to return? Where do you think he is in terms of leaning right now?
Well, you know how Jason is, so I would assume for him he'll even leave his intentions unknown until that shipment of beer kegs arrives from Nick Sirianni this year, like last year.
Yeah.
Even if he was planning to come back from the beginning, he's going to hold that. No, he does this. We know people close to Jason Kelce, and they said he's basically done this every year for the last 5 or 6 years, which is decompress, walk away for a little bit, do some soul searching, figure it out. He just became a father again. I think that's his second child that he's got now. So that's a factor in his life. His family is always important to him. And then when his mind is right, he makes a decision. He doesn't take so long that he holds the Eagles hostage, but he does take enough time to really make sure that he thinks through his decision. So I can tell you right now, and, I'm on my way to Indianapolis in a little bit. My flight will leave later. Adam and I, we usually get some
Make
sort of
sure you have a
way or
place
another
to
when we're out
stay
there.
this time when you go there. I'm not there to save you this time.
I knew, I almost reluctantly was going to say that because I figured you'd throw that in there. But last year we got a sense of what Jason was thinking. Not 100% clarity, but got a sense. And I imagine by the end of this week, we'll try to get a sense of it again.
Hey, I want to go back to real quick on Sean Desai as we're talking about some things moving forward here. He's interviewing. He's only been a coordinator once, right? And that didn't go all that well. What makes him I would say it didn't go all that well, but the Bears were not a good team that year. What makes him an attractive candidate for Philadelphia?
Well, yeah, just like you said, it didn't go well for the Bears, but his defense was actually fairly good that year. It was, I think, 6th in total defense, which is total yards allowed, and it was a top 5 passing defense. Not a great rushing defense, but in general, to be that good on a team that's that bad was pretty impressive. But obviously, he's a guy who's young, but he came up through the Bears under Vic Fangio. He wasn't hired by Vic Fangio. I think John Fox was still the head coach at the time they brought Sean Desai in there. And then even after Fox, there was, Mark Trestman. Mark Trestman was the head coach. I can't remember who his defensive coordinator was when he first started. That was when he first got there. And then it went to John Fox, and then defensive coordinator was Vic Fangio. So he's well principled and some pretty good defensive minds there. But really the Fangio, it's become like the Sean McVay thing, Mike, where if you spend some time, if you got, accidentally rubbed your shoulder against Sean McVay, right, you're now a hot head coaching candidate. Obviously the Vic Fangio stamp of approval is very helpful. And this is a guy who did work under Vic and performed well there, to the point when Vic moved on to get the Denver job, Matt Nagy promoted Sean Desai to defensive coordinator.
It was Mel Tucker, by the way. It was Mark Trestman's defensive coordinator. There you go.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Sports Bash Live, Geoff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast as we get ready for the Combine this week. I'll ask you a question we've been kind of chewing on. The Eagles have 2 picks. Does that, in your mind, we know Howie's thought process on drafting. Interior line is pretty probably like a 60% chance, but because they have 2 picks, do they go outside the box? Any luxury pick possible?
I don't think so. I don't think you would consider it a luxury pick because of how many players they're losing or stand to lose in free agency. They kind of need to replenish. Last year, they only made 5 draft picks, which is sort of low. You ordinarily would like to have 7 or 8. And this year, while they have 2 firsts and they have a 2nd and 3rd, I think they don't have picks, in the 4th or 5th or 6th or something like that. There's a middle area there where they're not abundant with picks. So I would say it's not a luxury pick for them. I think that they're going to try to get as much help now as possible.
I'm sure you've seen these mock drafts that have them taking Bijan Robinson, the running back, and you're like, yeah, right. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, hey, you know what? We have 2 picks. We got an extra pick. We're losing Miles Sanders most likely. I don't know. Maybe it's not likely. I don't know what Sanders I just don't know what kind of action he's going to get on the market. There's so many good running backs out there, so he might not get what he's looking for. He wants to come back. But do they say, you know what? We have an extra pick. This guy is a top 5 player. Why not? Let's do it.
You talking about Bijan Robinson?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I know, and we wrote this up on InsideTheBirds.com, that Daniel Jeremiah made a really compelling argument for why you would do that, because offensively they're so good that if you just added Bijan Robinson into the mix, you would have one of the most explosive offenses again, and you would get 5 really good years out of it. You know, even if you just started to decline, you would wind up, you can get 5 years out of a first-round pick, especially a running back. Even if you declined after year 6, you should have done enough in the first 5 years to at least make that pick worthwhile. So it's a compelling argument, and we do know that the Eagles would have taken Christian McCaffrey way back when if the opportunity had come. He went before them, but I would still say it's very, very unlikely. I would handicap it as, 20-1 type thing. I'm not really good with that stuff, but I just don't think it's a likely scenario because I think that there's going to be too many good players, other positions they value that fall there, whether it's corner or pass rusher or interior lineman or offensive tackle. In fact, I think what the Eagles are praying for is for Daniel Jeremiah to be correct about Anthony Richardson, the quarterback.
Yeah.
And Daniel said that he thinks that Richardson's going to be not just a first-round pick, but a high first-round pick. Because if you put 4 quarterbacks in the top 10, that's 6 position players that now are one of them should be 1 or 2, if not more, will be available to the Eagles when they pick at 10, right? Because of the way the math works out there. So it should be a good situation for them.
Carson Wentz has been released by Washington. He's a free agent now. Have we seen the last of Carson Wentz, or will a team take a shot?
Yeah, I mean, I don't I don't pretend to know what Carson's thinking or what's in his head or have anyone close to him telling me anything. So I'll just go ahead and say the one thing I would question is, does Carson Wentz have the mental makeup to be a backup quarterback in this league? Because when he's had to, first of all, he's been basically yanked like 3 times by 3 different teams and had somebody else go in his place. Well, I should say 3, 2. The Colts really didn't do that to him. But the Colts basically said, you're done with us after a year, and we're going to go for like Matt Ryan, and then when that didn't work out, anybody else. So he's getting the messages constantly now for the last 3 years. Other guys step into the job and seem to perform better, whether it was Nick Foles or lately Tyler Heineke. I just don't know if he has that in him to want to be someone who has to prove himself and compete for the job. Now, maybe somebody will offer him a starting job and say, you're our guy going into the year. I have a hard time believing that. Yeah. If it happens, I can see it. But if he's being told, you're a backup now, we're going to pay you accordingly and have you compete and, see what happens. All the injuries he's been through and all the drama he's been through, I don't know if he's about that life, man. I really don't.
Yeah, it's a really, look, and I'm not someone who wants to hate on the guy. It's been, to me, what happened to him really is a sad story. I mean, I think the injuries just piled up on this guy, and he just couldn't be the dynamic. I mean, when in 2016, 2017, he did a lot with his legs that he just could not do anymore when he came back between the knee injury, the back injury, he had all sorts of rib. I mean, I think those injuries just piled on the fact, and it didn't help that he was not the most popular guy. I think all of that just derailed this guy's career, which is a shame.
I agree. I think you're right. It is sort of a sad story. Like you said, some of it's sad because he brought it on himself. Others, it's just really crazy circumstances of getting hurt and watching other people perform better. I think the most real statement you can make about the Eagles and Carson Wentz, just from take the emotions out of it, is when you watch the NFL today and you watch Josh Allen. That's the guy I think that the Eagles and most fans thought that Carson Wentz was going to be for the long haul, right? I mean, that's kind of what everybody thought Carson was going to be by the end of 2017 or right before the knee injury, and he just never was that consistently.
All right, Sports Bash, football at 4. Mosher's heading to the Combine. The guys will be with us all week. Kaplan, DeCecco, Mosher. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Safe flight, man.
Thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.
All right, there's Geoff Mosher, of course, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.